This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening. My name is Ramon Robinson, Director of Transportation for Anne Arundel County and the Vice Chair of the Baltimore Regional Transportation Board, or BRTB for short. On behalf of the BRTB, I want to thank you for joining us this evening to learn more about the draft 2021 to 2024 Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP for short, and the associated Air Quality Conformity Determination. Both of these important documents are open for review and public comment through Friday, July 17th. The purpose of this evening's meeting is a chance for you to learn more about the key projects, major changes from last year, and the funding levels. This overview will be followed by an opportunity for you to ask questions and learn where to submit comments as well as ask questions. I'm joined tonight by two transportation planners from the Baltimore Metropolitan Council, Mr. Zach Kaufman, who will provide a detailed overview of the TIP, and Ms. Sarah Tomlinson, who will share information on the Air Quality Conformity Determination. Then we will turn this to Ms. Monica Haynes Bincata, Public Involvement Coordinator, to lead us through a question and answer session, followed by information on how you can submit comments to the BRTB. Now, I'll turn it over to Mr. Kaufman. Zach.
All right. Thanks, Ramon. As Ramon said, I'm a transportation planner here at BMC, and as part of that work, I help to manage the Transportation Improvement Program. And so I'll be going over what the TIP is and kind of a broad summary of what is included in the 21 to 24 TIP. So the TIP includes all federally funded and regionally significant projects that are programming funds over the next 4 fiscal years. So federally funded projects are those that receive federal funds from either the Federal Highway Administration or the Federal Transit Administration. And regionally significant projects are those that may not be federally funded, but they're projects of regional importance. And generally, they're capacity expanding projects that have to be included in our air quality model to ensure that the Baltimore region adheres to air quality standards. So there are 140 of these projects in the TIP, 24 new projects, and it programs a total of $4.26 billion in federal, state, and local money. 58% of that is federal funding, and 42% of that is state and local funding. It goes to all types of transportation projects, highway, transit, bicycle, and pedestrian, and it's focused on maintaining, operating, and expanding our transportation system. Now, one thing that's important to point out is that the TIP is funding limited or fiscally constrained. So that means that program funds can't exceed what is reasonably expected to be available from local, state, and federal sources. In addition, projects are evaluated to ensure that they are supporting our regional transportation planning goals, such as accessibility, safety, and prosperity. Now, these are laid out in more detail in our long-range transportation plan, and that plan has a preferred alternative of projects that extends out 25 years. And so it's more conceptual in nature, and as those projects move from the conceptual into the implementation phase, they enter the short-range transportation improvement program, and that details funding, as I said, over the next 4 fiscal years. All right, so we're going to explore some funding in the TIP here. I created an interactive dashboard through Tableau that allows you to explore funding for different project sponsors and by category, but I'm just going to highlight a couple of things here. First is funding by implementing agencies. So the largest source of program funds is the Maryland State Highway Administration. That's programming about $1.5 billion of the $4.26 billion in the TIP. Second largest source is the Maryland Transit Administration at about $1.14 billion. Now, it's important to point out that that $1.14 billion doesn't include the vast majority of MTA operating funds, which are state only and aren't included in that total. The Maryland Transportation Authority is programming about $800 million. The Ports Administration, about $453 million. The vast majority of that is in the Howard Street Tunnel project. And locally sponsored projects program a total of $363 million. I just noticed that the legend is kind of cut off here. But the blue bars here are federal funding, and the orange bars are state and local funding. So those locally sponsored projects are projects sponsored by Baltimore City, by Carroll, Baltimore, Hartford, Anne Arundel, Howard, and Queen Anne's counties. Another way that we kind of organize funding in the TIP is by project category. So it kind of gives you a broad distribution of the buckets that we're spending money on as a region. So there are 9 categories. The largest category of funding is highway capacity at about 31% of the TIP. The second largest category is highway preservation at 25%. Transit preservation, about 15.8%, ports at 10.6%, and smaller amounts in the remaining categories. Now, it's also important to point out that categories aren't really one-to-one. Highway preservation projects may include environmental and safety components. Emission reduction strategies includes projects that replace transit vehicles with more efficient vehicles. So that could be part of transit preservation, but it kind of gives you an idea of how we're spending our money as a region. So to dig into some of the larger categories, I'm going to switch over to PowerPoint real quick. And so this is a breakdown of the largest category, highway capacity, and it shows that the funding in highway capacity is really concentrated in only a few projects. So I-95, MDTA has a project on I-95 that adds express toll lanes in Baltimore and Hartford counties, and that project accounts for about 60% of highway capacity. Another 19% is in a project on the Baltimore Beltway. It expands the inner and outer loops to 4 lanes by using the inside shoulder from I-70 to Maryland 43. So right there, that's about 80% of highway capacity funds, and another 9% are in roadway widening projects on Maryland 175 and Maryland 32. So those projects, those 4 account for about 87% of highway capacity funding. You see something similar with highway preservation, although there are many more highway preservation projects. Some of those tend to be smaller, so I broke this out by project type. About 42% are roadway resurfacing and rehabilitation projects. About 37% are bridge repair and deck replacement, and another 19% are in this other category. So that's projects that don't neatly fit into one of the highway preservation project types. But the vast majority of those other funds are in State Highway Administration project for area-wide safety and spot improvements. And those improvements are smaller improvements spread throughout the region. They might be geometric improvements in intersections, they might be guardrails, they might be roundabouts, but the vast majority of those other funds are in that. So those 3 categories account for about 99% of highway preservation. And this is a breakdown of transit preservation funds, and you see something similar. About 43% of transit preservation funds are in a project that's focused on overhauling all of the metro and light rail vehicles. Another 29% are in a preventive maintenance focused project for bus and rail. And another 12% are in a metro and light rail system preservation and improvement project. So that focuses on facilities, infrastructure, track, and equipment. So basically non-vehicle expenditure. Speaking of MTA, we include a summary of all program funds for MTA because MTA utilizes the public participation process for our TIP to meet FTA's public participation requirements for their program of projects. And so this kind of summarizes MTA's funding in the TIP in broad categories. So the largest category by far is this top one, Section 5307C. So that's capital requests in urbanized areas that are used for bus purchases, bus replacements, and preventive maintenance. And that's about 520 million of MTA's money, so almost 50%. The second largest category is 5337. That's state of good repair funds that are used for preventive maintenance and for MARC. And the third largest category is congestion mitigation and air quality at about 220 million. So those are projects that are aimed at reducing air emissions and improving air quality in the region. So before I transition to specific projects in the 21 to 24 TIP, this summarizes how funding has varied by TIP for the last 4 TIPs. So the 2020 to 2023 TIP included about $3.66 billion. And that increased to about $4.26 billion in the 2021 TIP. So that's an increase of about 600 million. And I wanted to give an idea of kind of the broad categories that led to that increase. So on the federal side, MDOT MTA has increased their federal programming from 772 million to 902 million. Now, this isn't necessarily new funding. It's attributed primarily to MTA playing catch up on grant execution. So some grants were delayed, and thus some fiscal 20 money has been added to fiscal 21, and that's increased the amount of federal dollars that MDOT MTA has in the TIP. One project that is quite large and is new is Maryland Ports Administration's federal discretionary grant for the Howard Street Tunnel. They received a large federal grant of 125 million for that project, and that's also a large source of state and local funding increase, primarily state in this case. So that project has right here about $300 million in matching funds for the Howard Street Tunnel, and that's coming from both CSX and the state. Finally, a large source of state increase is MDTA's I-95 northbound extension project, which I already referenced. That has about $775 million in the TIP, up from $556 million in the 2020 TIP. And that funding is MDTA toll revenues. All right, so I will transition now back to the story map here and focus on some specific project highlights. First up, in Anne Arundel County, the county is dedicating $14 million in funding for a multimodal transportation center in Parole that's intended to serve existing local and regional bus service. They're planning to hopefully add some connectivity to bike share, car share, and ride hailing. And they're currently evaluating 2 potential locations. One is the Westfield Annapolis Mall. The other is the Harry S. Truman Park and Ride. And that's projected for a year of operation of 2025. Baltimore City has added a number of bicycle and pedestrian focused projects. I'll zoom out so you can see all of them. They're highlighted in blue here. The first is a cycle track in Southwest Baltimore on Bush Street near Carroll Park. The second is a cycle track on Utah Place that connects Druid Hill Park to the existing bike lane on Center Street and the downtown bike network that the city has been working on. The third is the Middle Branch Phase 2 trail between the existing Middle Branch Trail and the Inner Harbor cycle track. That's eventually going to be part of the Baltimore Greenway Loop that will create a continuous bikeable path around the city of Baltimore when it's complete. And finally, the fourth is a cycle track on Wolf or Washington Street, and that's a 2-mile cycle track that creates a key connection in East Baltimore. So Baltimore County is using $2 million in federal and local funds that they received in a federal discretionary grant. So they received a bus and bus facilities grant for the Towson Circulator. That's to purchase vehicles and signage for a new fixed route service. The routes haven't actually been determined yet, but they're evaluating them currently, and it will likely include 2 routes, an east-west and a north-south. In Carroll County, MDOT SHA has plans to complete improvements to Maryland 30 Business in Hampstead. That's projected to be complete in 2021 by reconstructing the existing roadway, adding ADA compliant sidewalks and crosswalks, some stormwater management, and some visual aesthetic improvements. In Howard County, they've added a project that widens Marriottsville Road from 2 to 4 lanes between US 40 and Maryland's 99, including replacing the existing 2-lane bridge over I-70. The bridge will include 6-foot bicycle lanes and ADA compliant sidewalks. It's a $26 million project that's projected to be complete in 2022. I've already referenced some of the Beltway expansion, but the largest Beltway expansion project is this conversion of the inside shoulder into a new travel lane, extending from I-70 the whole way around the Beltway to Maryland 43. That also includes reconfiguring the interchange of I-695 and I-70. It's a $281 million project in total, and the TIP has about $253 million of funding. Some of it was spent previously and some is being spent beyond fiscal 24. I've already referenced this project as well, but the Maryland Ports Administration received a large grant for the Howard Street Tunnel to create double stack rail access to and from the Port of Baltimore. It's projected to increase freight activity for the Port of Baltimore. That has a mix of over $400 million in federal, state, and private funds. Finally, I wanted to highlight two Maryland Transportation Authority projects. The first is the I-95 Access to Port Covington project. It's highlighted in yellow here. MDTA and Baltimore City thus far have collaborated on planning for changes to 7 miles of I-95 and surrounding streets. Continued funding is being planned, continued planning is being funded by the project developer for access to Port Covington. So the funding that is in the TIP is MDTA's matching funds for construction in fiscal 2024. They are applying for a federal discretionary grant. They haven't actually received that grant yet. So there isn't any federal money in the TIP, but MDTA's budgeted matching funds are in the TIP. And that project is projected to be complete in 2029. And finally, MDTA is continuing its expansion of the I-95 Express toll lanes. I've already referenced this project a couple of times. It's the largest project in the TIP. If I zoom out here, it extends from Maryland 43 to north of Maryland 24. It includes reconstruction of various interchanges, reconstruction of overpasses, construction of noise walls. There's a lot of components here, but it adds 2 express toll lanes over that stretch of I-95, $775 million in TIP funding, and it's a $1.1 billion project in total. So I won't go into all the rest of the projects, but I wanted to highlight that if you explore the interactive project map or you explore the story map, you can explore all the projects in the TIP by type. So this is currently highlighting all the highway and bridge projects. You can also look at transit projects, bike bed projects. So one thing that's important to point out, when you look at transit projects, this only includes the transit projects that are actually mappable. A lot of the transit money in the TIP is regionally focused projects for, bus repairs, bus purchases, MARC improvements, and so those projects aren't necessarily mappable. So they're included in the TIP document, but not necessarily on this map. All right, so that's kind of a rapid fire overview of some of the projects in the TIP. And now Sarah Tomlinson will present on some of the air quality components of the 21 to 24 TIP. Sarah?
Good evening, this is Sarah Tomlinson. I'll be speaking about the Air Quality Conformity Determination, as Zach said. The purpose of the Air Quality Conformity Determination is to make sure that the transportation projects and the Transportation Improvement Program and the existing long-range transportation plan Maximize 2045 do not worsen the regional air quality or delay timely attainment of national ambient air quality standards. As a background, the Baltimore region does not reach the current national ambient air quality standards for ground level ozone pollution. The current level set in 2015 by the US EPA is 75 parts per billion ozone pollution. And in 2019, the latest data that we have, the Baltimore region was at a level of 75 parts per billion. Ozone pollution can be very harmful to your health. For people that are elderly, children, and also people with lung disease such as asthma, it can lead to very rough breathing on code orange and code red days and can lead to long-term reduced lung function. The Transportation Conformity Determination is a process where emissions projected from the transportation network, and the transportation network would include proposed projects in the TIP, projects that have been proposed in the recent new long-range transportation plan, as well as existing transportation road network, are compiled together, and emissions projected region-wide from the transportation system are compared with the limits set in the State Air Quality Implementation Plan. This is what we call the SIP. So these limits we call the motor vehicle emission budgets. And the conformity determination process is where BMC staff and staff from the Maryland Department of the Environment get together, and they both model emissions projected from the transportation system with the TIP projects. And if emissions are below the motor vehicle emission budget, then we meet the conformity determination requirements. So that's what we did. The Interagency Consultation Group, which is under the Baltimore Regional Transportation Board, worked on the milestones of the conformity determination process, which ended with most recently with the ICG approving the draft emissions results from the conformity determination for public review. And that's what is available today, as well as the draft conformity determination document. And the conformity determination document states that the TIP is in conformity with the state implementation plan, and that expected emissions are below the emissions budget. So that wraps the air quality portion up.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I really appreciate that overview, and thanks, Zach. So this is Monica Haynes-Banqueta, and I'm the public involvement coordinator, and I wanted to just let folks know how they can comment. As we mentioned, we have a $4.3 billion transportation plan. These are transportation investments and improvements being planned that are going to shape our region's future for decades to come. And we really want to know what the public has to say about these transportation investments and the plan that the BRTB has issued. So we've identified various ways for people to send their comments. They can send their comments in by mail, by fax, on Twitter at Balto Metro Co. or at Be More Involved. We also have a hashtag BRTB Listens. We also accept comments by email. And this year, one of the great things that we've offered up is the opportunity for people to share their comments on an interactive map. And we will show you that now. Basically, this is our interactive map, and it allows people who are interested in looking at the various projects can either zoom in to your jurisdiction. You can click on the map. You can either click on a line. As you see, there's some colored lines there. Or you can click on a dot. When you click on one of those lines or dots, it'll pull up project information on the right side, and it'll show you an overview of what that project is. And if you're interested, you can give it if you like that project, you can give it a heart, or if you have comments on that, you can click on the text button and add your name, your zip code, your email, and then share with us your brief comment about what you think about that project. And you can go through and you can add your comments on one project or any of the over 100 different projects that we have available in this tip. And that's our interactive map. We wanted to make it available for the public to have an easy way to look for projects that are in their community that might be of interest, and to be able to quickly share your comments and information easily with the decision makers. So again, we welcome your comments through July 17th. And again, we welcome them by email, Twitter, fax, mail, and through our interactive map. And I'm going to turn it right back to Ramon. It does not look like we have any questions in the chat at this time. So without further ado, I just want to turn it back to Ramon Robinson.
Thank you, Monica. Also, thank you, Zach, and thank you, Sarah, for your presentations. Thank you all for joining us this evening. As was mentioned, I think this is being recorded, so you have a chance to, for those that couldn't be here this time, you can go back and look at it. And I thank you for taking the time to go back and look at it and providing any further questions that you may have. If you have any further questions, as Monica mentioned, please let us know by emailing comments at baltometro.org. As mentioned, the comments are welcome through July 17th. Please visit baltometro.org to view our interactive map and share your comments. Again, thank you for your time this evening. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.